Welcome to Fantastic Females, our adventure to finding the mythical island of freedom together. I'm Kalyani.
And I'm Rupali. We are your next door finance experts sharing our experiences in the world of money and energetics.
So, this is episode 4, where we go into details of modes of investing and where you can start today.
The financial space is so mature now that there are almost unlimited combinations of assets you could invest in, so that makes it really exciting. So maybe just to explain a little bit about what we are doing on this podcast, our model is to have a group coaching model whereby we break down difficult to understand concepts in easy bite-sized pieces, cut through the noise, help you understand your options, get to know yourself a little bit more. However, we are not financial advisors in this capacity, and so if there are any specific investment-related decisions that you need to be making, then it's always best to seek out your financial advisor. These podcasts will better equip you to have these conversations with your financial advisor.
Yeah, that's perfect. Also, I want to link this back to the concept of freedom of choice being the core freedom that we all seek. Freedom of choice basically begins with awareness, as we've discussed already, and we're laying out the map, the treasure map on this journey of financial freedom to know how to plan your route.
So getting back into the specifics of assets, we previously mentioned two types of assets. There are real assets and there are financial assets. What we are going to be doing is we are going to go into it with a little bit more detail to explain what these options are and how you can start.
Exactly. If anyone has missed out on the episode where we went into the introduction of the types of different assets, then please visit our website from the link in the show notes.
So starting with real assets. What are real assets?
Just to summarize what we've discussed already, they are more tangible physical assets such as real estate, commodities, basically heavy metals such as gold, silver, etc., and also luxury items such as art, shoes, watches, and bags.
These are tangible assets, as Kalyani said, in contrast to financial assets, which are more along the lines of investments in banks, your cash savings, your deposits, stocks and bonds, mutual funds, financial advisors who then run a mandate, and then private mandates.
And we're going to go into details of each one of these today. Are you excited?
Yay!
So first of all, real estate. We've kind of gone into a little bit of detail about this already. But just to once again summarize and refresh your memories, there are two different types of real estates broadly. One would be for the purpose of living in yourselves, while another would be as an investment where you earn a rental income from. There are many models that are kind of forming subtypes within these as well, where especially amongst rental, you could be doing Airbnb arbitrage, you could be managing properties, you could be earning income through various ways from real estate. But it's something that does require a big cash layout, and we want you to be aware whether this is sitting as an asset on your personal portfolio, whether it's earning you an income or not.
Some of these real assets are known to hold value. They're called store of value, such as gold.
Yeah, exactly. And especially as South Asian women, a lot of us were given gold when we got married, and it's seen as a form of security that we should consider as a safety net for us. But that doesn't apply so much to the current generation. What are your thoughts on that, Rupali?
Yeah, completely agree. In terms of gold, like for example, our parents' generation grew up knowing gold bars, jewelry, all held at the bank locker today. And whereas our options have changed drastically between now and then.
Absolutely. And I think it's a bit similar with luxury assets as well. There's so much, there's a lot of subjectivity in terms of what gains value. Recently, there was a collaboration between Adidas and a popular restaurant chain in Dubai, and apparently the Apparently, some of the shoes went, I think, for 3 times the value or something crazy like that. And it had a lot of different aspects to it, but it's a very subjective kind of increase in value. So we like to consider these more as a store of value, meaning that they kind of retain their value. They don't depreciate over time, such as cash tends to do. So that's good to bear in mind.
Elaborating on some of these luxury assets, we come across these brands, these watch brands, for example. They control how much they produce in order to have that brand value. And as a result of which, there are cases where people have bought these watches, bags, used them, and then sold them for multiple times that price.
Yeah, exactly. But personally, just bringing a personal angle into this as well. With gold jewelry, for example, I found there's a big aspect of where you sell it, whether it's at the same shop where you bought it from. There are some making charges that you lose. If there are any diamonds, then you tend to completely lose on that value. And with luxury items, what if the business model changes of the company that you've bought from? Then you're kind of like at their behest.
Right, and this is so important because it's really important to understand that not all luxury goods are assets.
Exactly. Going into financial assets now, the first very obvious one would be anything to do with a bank. Banks are the primary source of where we all tend to go in terms of savings and investments. And the first very obvious way to hold value is to have cash. Previously, this would be hidden under your mattress, behind a loose tile, recently more so in savings accounts in our banks. But let's go a little bit into why it's not good to have all your investments or savings as plain cash.
Cash does not earn any income of its own, may not earn any income of its own, or you may earn a nominal interest rate in your savings account.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, maybe in brief, I would like to also remind you of the concept of inflation that we've again touched upon before. So money tends to lose its value over time, meaning with the same amount of money, you're able to buy less and less over time. We've all seen this in our practical lives. So the rate of return that you get on your cash investments should at least match this rate of inflation for you to be able to retain the value of your cash investments. Normally, though, we see that any deposits related to banks give you a return of 1 to 3%. Also, this is also being really generous. Whereas the inflation rates are much higher. In a healthy economy, inflation rates are around 5%. Whereas in our current climate, we've heard 8%, 9% inflation rates, which might even be higher if you look at it in real terms, meaning how a consumer actually experiences it. So in comparison, this is what we mean when we say that cash tends to lose value over time if it's held just as cash. We need to make that cash work for us.
Right, and linked to this topic are the terms real interest and nominal interest. Nominal interest is what the bank tells you that you're earning. So, as Kalyani mentioned, 1 to 3%, depending on the country and currency, of course, but 1 to 3% is what you get in Dubai. And that is your nominal interest rate. If your inflation is 5%, then your real rate of interest is your nominal interest, which is 1 to 3%. Let's say, for example, 3% minus inflation, which is 5%. That brings you to negative 2% real interest. That means you're losing 2% each year in terms of the value of your money.
Yeah, and there are schools of thought that to add to just what Rupali went into, that say that leaving cash in your bank accounts is the same as flushing it down the toilet. And I don't think either of us has such an extreme view, because a big aspect of this is cash management in terms of managing your goals and knowing your responsibilities, commitments coming up as cash outlays. So there is a need for having accessible liquid cash available that covers your 3 to 6 months of expenses. But the rest can be put to work, which is what we're looking at in terms of investment options.
Also, while you're deciding what to invest in, that may take time. And so if you're hesitant to completely keep it in 100% cash. You could do a short-term deposit to do your cash management, as Kalyani mentioned.
Exactly. Whatever you get on top, like even if it's 200 dirhams, 400 dirhams, we were just discussing some options that give really nominal rates of return. Even that is something. It's better than zero. The next commonly known option that we have on the list are stocks and bonds. We have a lot to say about this.
Right, yes. And what are stocks?
So I have another business called Trading Mum, where I teach individuals and groups to create passive income through trading. And this has been a big journey for me to learn on my own. Stocks, very simply put, are a way for private companies to borrow money from the public. And when you buy a stock or a share in a company, you literally own that share in the company. So you own a small percentage of that company. And in that sense, it's a good way, it's a safe way to invest in businesses.
The reason why it's an easy way to do it is because there aren't any restrictions in terms of how much you can invest. You can buy fractions. And so it really depends on how much you would like to buy versus what you have to put in as an investment.
And this is such a wide kind of spectrum as well. You could have so many different calculations of, you could have so many different instruments related to stocks, such as options, futures, various types of derivatives. But just keeping it really simple to understand this option, you can simply buy and hold stocks, which is more long-term investing, or you can enter and exit based on the market movements, which is trading, and that's what I am actively involved in.
Right. So there are two forms of investing. There's strategic investing and there's tactical investing. Strategic is more your long-term type of view, that over the next 3 to 5 years, what do I expect? If I think, for example, Amazon is going to do great as a result of their AI or as a result of their drone deliveries or whatever developments are coming, I may say, okay, I'd like to hold the stock for the next 3 to 5 years, whether it goes up or down. But tactical trading happens where if we feel markets have overreacted as a result of news such as COVID, as a result of news such as, the Fed interest rates or anything like this, but we feel the business is sound, then we may do tactical trading where we buy cheap and sell high.
And also what I say a lot in the context of Trading Mum, I normally mention that there are two ways of doing it. One is where you invest in stocks of companies that you tend to use or you're emotionally attached to. I know some people who are big fans of Apple, Disney, Starbucks, and they should definitely own stocks because they're so attached to and invested in these businesses emotionally that they truly are convinced of its business proposition. Or if you are more interested in creating a passive income, which is more trading or tactical investing, as Rupali mentioned, then it's good to invest some time in learning about mass psychology, chart behavior, and different forms of analysis of stocks.
The other part of this is bonds. Bonds are when companies raise debt from investors. In other words, they borrow money from the common investor out there to be able to fund specific expenses or more strategic type of growth related targets.
Yeah, sometimes governments also issue bonds. They tend to be popular amongst risk-averse investors, but there are some restrictions to who can enter the bond market, right?
Yep. So each geography, so depending on where you're based and depending on what you would like to invest in, which bonds you would like to invest in, there are some rules and restrictions in terms of what your minimum wealth should be and what the minimum ticket size, in other words, what's the minimum amount you can invest in a bond. However, there are many different means to get exposure to bonds via different vehicles that are out there for the common investor like you and I.
Exactly. Also to add to this whole vast kind of ocean that stocks and bonds tend to be, there are markets for each country, and within each country there might be multiple indices. Each index represents the market in terms of how it's been performing. So it's taken as a representative of the whole economy pretty much. And the one that's most referred to in terms of how the world economy is performing is the US market, specifically the New York Stock Exchange. There will be more mention of this coming up on the podcast, and we will go into more details of how exactly you can be involved. But we want you at this point to build on a basic foundation so that you can understand what your choices are once again. Yeah. So we've spoken about individual stocks. There are also ways to invest in a bundle or a basket of stocks, which kind of helps you in hedging your risks, which spreads your exposure from being invested in one individual company to a basket of companies. And there are various ways to do that. One is mutual funds. The second is index funds. They're quite similar. And then we'll cover ETFs, which are in a league of their own.
Right. The stocks and bonds that we covered are more you choosing this stock is the one I want to invest. This bond is the one I want to invest in. However, another option to do this is through mutual funds. This is done through vehicles that have been set up whereby these portfolio managers invest with specific targets and objectives.
Yeah, I would also like to pool index funds in kind of a similar category. And one thing that we would like to kind of share here, as risk averse and popular these instruments are, they are pretty subjective because they're managed by real people. They also have high admin fees to pay for these systems and machineries. So it is a bet that you're taking in terms of putting your faith in a team of humans, and that's okay if that suits you, but it's good to be aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. The option that you have, however, is you get many different types of mutual funds. So it's really important to understand that each portfolio manager, each team covers specific geographic exposures, specific styles, specific sectors. It may be broad market, it may be niches, and so this is where we get to shop and choose which one fits our portfolio.
What are ETFs, Rupali?
So ETFs are exchange traded funds. These funds are set up as investment vehicles that mimic specific indices for specific exposures.
Sometimes they are also based on choices of the fund manager. A popular one being the ARK ETF by Cathie Woods. And they would generally have a sector-specific outlook or some sort of personal bias that comes in. The good thing is that you can see their performance on a chart just the same way as any individual stock, and you can trade, meaning get in and out as an individual stock. So the control still remains in your hands. The performance is for you to see in front of your eyes, and you're not dependent on any middlemen to execute.
To summarize, mutual funds, index funds, and ETFs are a basket of stocks that you can invest into and diversify your investment in this way.
Absolutely. And the next category of investments are done via financial advisors. Now, I had heard of financial advisors, but until recently, I don't think even I have been exposed to more than, say, 2 types of financial advisors. So let's talk about all the different types that we know of.
Yeah, and a financial advisor is someone who gives you advice on your money on many different modes of investing. Some are banks, asset management firms, insurance advisors, LIC, pension advisors.
The popular advisors that we tend to come into contact with may be based out of banks. They may be based out of a particular asset management company. They may be advising on ways of insurance management, or they may be pension advisors, amongst others.
The key thing to remember with financial advisors is while it's great that they give you access, they give you information, however, each individual advisor is also a person. In the market, while there are people that know more about certain topics and less about certain topics, no one is a true expert and no one really knows how investments are going to play out.
Yeah, so as much as you might want a one-stop shop where you go to one person who tells you exactly where to invest, exactly what percentage to put where, unfortunately that person doesn't exist apart from being within yourselves. I like to think of this as an analogy with a car salesman. So you might go to buy a Toyota and the Toyota car salesman would be very knowledgeable about Toyota cars. But if you're expecting them to make a decision for you in terms of whether to buy a Toyota versus a BMW, a Lexus, a Nissan, they would probably be pretty biased towards the products that they know the best, which is Toyota cars, and they wouldn't actually have knowledge about all the cars available, they won't be able to take guarantee of how any cars, even their own showroom cars, perform out on the road. That really comes down to how you are as a driver. So bringing back the analogy to finance, it really kind of depends on your own research, your own risk palette, and it's really empowering, I think, to take this control in your hands.
Completely agree. I think to be empowered in this way is our biggest aim through this podcast series, whereby we break down information into bite-sized information that you can digest in a very easy way, and then you're better equipped to have these conversations with people such as your financial advisor.
Exactly. And it might even come down to your own personality. So I know a lot of people who don't like the topic of money. That obviously needs work, and that obviously is something that needs to be resolved energetically. But it's okay if that's not your cup of tea, and if you prefer to have someone else manage your portfolio. All we want you to have in mind is to adjust your expectations accordingly, or to have the awareness that you might be being pushed towards some instruments because it's kind of where their knowledge comes from, or their fund might have some restrictions, or they might have some commissions attached to the sale that they make to you. So it really comes down to your personality, whether you have the time and the inclination to manage your investment portfolio yourself, or you'd rather outsource it to someone.
This is where it's really important to understand that every institution, financial advisor, form of investment has pros and cons, and our aim is to better equip you to make decisions.
Absolutely. The last one in our list is private mandates.
Yep. So private mandates is an interesting one. Private mandates are something that high net worth individuals or companies set up for very specific objectives, targets, with specific limits and restrictions, whereby they have an agreement with an asset management company to structure their pool of assets in a very particular way. They outsource the decision making to these companies to be able to run their investment portfolio within very clear, specific guidelines.
Yeah, this private mandate is new even for me to learn about. So thank you for sharing that, Rupali. This brings us to a very important factor of knowing yourselves more from the aspect of your own risk tolerance. And we've put together a fun quiz that helps you identify this. Please visit the link in our show notes to know this for yourselves. This quiz was compiled as a part of my business called Trading Mum to help people understand their own risk tolerance, because that's where it truly starts in terms of setting your expectations for the returns that you're expecting from your portfolio. And it's a fun way to understand where you stand right now. This very well might change in the coming few months or years based on your goals, etc. But we encourage you to visit the link in the show notes to know where you stand right now, so that you can make an informed decisions with all the information we're about to cover in the next episode.
Yep, this is a fun quiz that Kalyani has put together, and I've done mine. So it's been a really interesting experience, and hopefully you enjoy the process too.
So today we've had to hold back from going into more details about each of these, just so that we've kind of laid out the treasure map, so to say, to help you kind of build a good foundation and plan your own route out on this journey of financial freedom.
But we feel so excited to unpack each of these in a lot more detail in a very simple way for you to understand.
So please share this podcast, leave your reviews, your comments to support us on our journey. We are so passionate about making your lives more abundant with this information.
So with that, we bring this episode of our financial adventure to an end. Please follow us on all social media platforms at Fantastic Females.